Right guys, in our last video we created a contact form for our page, but we can't submit any message yet. So in this video we're going to see how to create a new controller. We're going to add a submit method. We're going to check the parameters from the request in our controller, and finally, we're going to add some validation to the form and show errors, and we're going to see how to customize the error messages and validation attributes. Okay, so as we saw on our first videos, a controller is some place or a file to handle our application's logic. So if we go to the Lravel web page, we can see that instead of defining all of your request handling logic as closures in route files, you may wish to organize this behavior using controller classes. Controllers can group related request handling logic into a single class. Controllers are stored in the app HTTP controllers directory. So what is a closure? Let's go to our route files, and here we have web.php, and as we can see here, this is a closure. Okay, it's a function defined on the fly. So imagine that instead of this, we have 100 lines of code. Then we will have all of our application logic in this file, and this is not good. So the best thing is to have modules on your application, and controllers allows us to do that. So let's start by checking this, and now we are creating a new controller with the artisan command line. So I'm going to open a new console. I'm going to development basic website, and you can create a new controller using artisan make controller, and I'm going to name it contact controller. So as a convention, you should add controller as a suffix of the name and just hit enter, and you have created a new controller, and we can see it from app HTTP controllers contact controller. Okay, so the namespace or the directory that this controller is app HTTP controllers, as we said. And as we saw in the last video, as we are handling requests, here we have the use illuminate. Illuminate is just Lravel HTTP request. So in this video, we're going to see how to handle this request. Okay, so let's add a submit method. Public function submit. And let's return 1, 2, 3 and try this function. Okay, so the way to do this is to erase the closure and just call contact controller at submit. Okay, so now if we call contact submit through our form, this should call the submit function on the contact controller, and this should return 123. And we have 123. So this is working correctly. Okay, we added a submit method. Now we should check the request, the fields or the parameters that comes with this request, okay? So as we can see here, we have request implemented, so we can receive the request as a parameter for this function, okay? Now we have request, and instead of returning 123, I'm going to die and dump this request variable, and we will see what this is going to show. Great. So we have a lot of things here, as you can see. Here we have our request parameters. Of course, as we didn't insert any data, they are all null. And we have the headers of the request, encodings, path info, for example, request URI, which is contact submit, the method, which could be post or get or anything else. And this is all the information that our controller is receiving through this request variable. So if we want to retrieve some of the parameters or all of the parameters from our form, for example, we can use the input method, and let's say that we want to retrieve the email, so you just type email. And we have null, of course. So if we enter something here like john@doe.com, now we have john@doe.com. So we are actually getting our parameters from the form, okay? We can check this out. And now we are ready to add some validation using Lravel validation requests. Of course, we can use HTML, for example, like this. I'm going to our contact view, and we can add here the required attribute. So in this way, this can't be blank, okay? Let's go back for a moment. Of course, you can add some front-end validation with JavaScript and with these HTML attributes, but now we are adding some backend validation. You should always have backend validation, because if you have front-end validation only, the user can actually disable the JavaScript from the browser. Of course, you have to know how, and then your form wouldn't have validation. And this could be really dangerous in terms of security, okay? Besides of having front-end validation, you should always have backend validation, because the user can't control your backend, okay? So now we're going to see how to add a backend validation. Let's search for Lravel validation. And let's read for a moment that Laravel provides several different approaches to validate your application's incoming data. By default, Laravel's base controller class uses a validate request trait, which provides a convenient method to validate incoming HTTP requests with a variety of powerful validation rules. So you have two kinds of validations. For example, with the validate method, or a more organized or cleaner way to do this is with form request validation through creating form requests. So for more complex validation scenarios, you may wish to create a form request. Form requests are custom request classes that contain validation logic. To create a form request class, use the make request artisan CLI command. So let's do this, okay? Add validation using Laravel validation requests. I'm going to copy this. And we have PHP artisan make request. And we're going to add contact request. This is a convention as well. And now here in HTTP folder, we have a requests folder with our contact request file with two main methods, authorize and rules. Here we are going to write our validation rules, okay? For example, if we want the name to be required, we can just write name required. Okay, and now we have to tell the controller to use this request. So we are not receiving a regular request anymore, but a contact request. Okay, now let's see what happens here. We have an error. Class app HTTP controller's contact request does not exist. And this is because we should add this to our controller. We have to use app HTTP requests contact request. So action is unauthorized, and that's because we have an authorized method here, and let's read this. Determine if the user is authorized to make this request. So this means that in this function you can add logic to see whether the user is allowed to make this request or not. So for us, this should be true. And now it works. So as you can see, it's redirecting us to our contact form instead of showing, for example, 1, 2, 3. And this is because this is not filled. Okay, now it's working. So now we have our validation requests, and it's time to see how to show the validation errors, okay? Because this is throwing an error, but we should show it to the user. So let's go back to Lravel web page. And here we have the displaying validation errors, okay? So we should add this to our page or our template. And I'm going to add this to first of all to our contact page, like this. So if we have any errors, let's display an alert danger. This is Bootstrap. And we have a for each loop with the global errors variable. So we loop for each error and we show the error in the page. Okay, let's see if this works. Now everything is empty. And if I hit submit, now I have the error displayed. Okay, so the name field is required. Great. So let's add, for example, some few more validation rules for email. We need that this field to be required and it needs to be an email. Okay, where do you see these validation rules? Here in Lravel web page. Here you have all the available validation rules. Okay, so for example, if we have an email, we can click here and it says the field under validation must be formatted as an email address. So let's check this out. The email can't be blank, so it's required and should be an email. Okay, so let's try this first. Okay, the name field is required and the email field is required. Now I'm going to insert the name and now shows that the email field is required, and I'm putting here anything, for example, John. And okay, this is the error from HTML. Okay, I'm going to remove this for a while in contact blade. So let's say that you have text type. So this is John Doe and John. Let's see what happens. Now I have another error message that says that email must be a valid email address. Okay, so you can do the same thing with every validation rule that you want. So you have required if condition, it's true, required unless, integer, before date, boolean, date, max, less than, active URL. So every validation rule has its own parameters and its own way to implement it. Okay, so let's get back to the type email, and now we have the HTML validation, and if for some reason this fails, we have our backend validation. Okay, so we have name required, email required, and email type. What else do we have? Subject and message. So let's make all these fields required. And let's see how it goes. Great, so the 4 fields are required now, okay? So I think we can check this out, and now we can customize our error messages and validation attributes. Let's see how. We go to the top of the page. We have, for example, customizing the error messages. Let's say that we do not like this text and we want to customize this or change this, okay? So we have to add a function named messages to our request file. So here we have public function messages, and here we can return an array with custom messages. So for example, for name, when it is required, I want to show another message. For example, you should fill the name field. Okay, and it changed. And you can do this for every message that you want to show for validation rules. Now, let's say that you want to change the, for example, instead of showing the email field, you want to show that the email address field is required. So you can change the name attribute. How? Adding a function, an attributes function to the same file. So let's type public function attributes and return another array. And let's grab email and change it for email address. Now, instead of the email field, we will have the email address field is required. Okay? So we can check this item out. And now we have a new file called contact request, and the workflow goes like this. The user enters to the contact route, which is a get route, and this returns the contact view. So we go here, and we have a form that displays 4 fields. When the user clicks submit, this takes us to the route name contact form submit, which is this route, because we put this name on the last video. Now this redirects or uses the submit method of the contact controller. So let's see the contact controller submit method. If this works okay, for example, John Doe, john@doe.com, this is the subject, message. We have 1, 2, 3 because we are not interacting with the database yet. Now we have validation on this form, okay? So the way to add a backend validation is this. We received a contact request as a variable, and Lravel automatically redirects the flow of the application to this file. So it says name should be required, email as well, and it should be a valid email, and the same with subject and message. Okay, now for the name, when it is required, this message should be displayed, and when a validation message that includes email is displayed, you should display email address. So here's the thing. If any of these validation rules fails, the application stops here and returns to the contact blade, with this variable being not empty. So this will be shown. If these validation rules are all true, so they are all fulfilled, the flow of the application continues, enters this method. So in this case, you should see 1, 2, 3. Okay? So this is the flow of the contact page. So I hope you understood it. And in the next video, we're going to see how to interact with the database and actually save the message to the database, and then we're going to see how to retrieve that message. Okay? So that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that I could make myself clear, and I see you on the next video. Thank you very, very much.